Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Arun, and I cover cloud and AI at Gartner, and I'm super excited to spend the next 30 minutes with you. The past 10 months have seen unprecedented pace of innovation in the field of AI. ChatGPT, which is probably the unofficial mascot for AI, has captivated the imagination of the public. And that's led to a resurgence of interest in AI from board of directors to CEOs and CIOs. Having said that, there is tremendous amount of hype about generative AI in the market. In fact, in the most recent hype cycle for emerging technologies that Gartner published, we placed Gen AI nearing the peak of inflated expectations. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about what CIOs need to know about Gen AI, and more importantly, how they can avoid some of the avoidable mistakes as they harness the value of this powerful technology. Is ChatGPT an incremental innovation or a game-changing revolution? That is the question that's keeping the AI research community divided. On one side, people argue that ChatGPT and large language models are merely good next word predictors or next sentence predictors, which is a way of saying they have no idea what they're creating. And they often cite the hallucinations and egregious mistakes that these models occasionally make. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, researchers believe that we are in the early stages of AGI, which in plain speak is human-level intelligence. After all, which parrot would hire a human being from a tile marketplace to go and crack CAPTCHA on its behalf? Which is a very interesting story if you want to read it online. I don't think we're going to reach a conclusion in this debate in this 30-minute presentation. However, we know two things. One, large language models and foundation models are a phenomenal technical advance. However, we need to customize them, we need to steer them, and we need to de-risk them before we deploy them within the enterprise. And even more importantly, for us to create even more intelligent AI systems in the future, we have to train them the way human beings learn. For example, as children, we don't learn just by reading textbooks, do we? We learn through our five senses, and we learn through observing the world, which is how we need to train the models in the future, which is we have to train them using multi-modalities: text, video, speech, code, and so on and so forth. And even more importantly, we need to have these AI systems to observe the real world and observe from real world. That is the research progress that a lot of technology companies are heading towards. Again, in summary, in this presentation, we're going to talk about what CIOs need to know about Gen AI and what best practices you can look at to bring this technology within your enterprise. Executive leaders are cautiously optimistic about the future of Gen AI. Close to 2/3 of executives believe that the benefits of Gen AI far outweigh its risks. Which begs the question, what are the benefits of Gen AI and what are the risks of Gen AI? The benefits of Gen AI are fairly well chronicled. The near-term benefit of Gen AI is clearly going to be around workforce productivity. We're starting to see early evidence of that in many different business functions, such as customer service, marketing and communications, software engineering, human resources, to name a few. The other big benefit of Gen AI is the sheer versatility of these models, which is they're capable of being applied in many different domains. For example, if you take ChatGPT, the same model that generates poem and text is also the model that generates code. How many developers do we have that can write poem, or how many poets do we have that can generate code? But in the long run, the real promise of Gen AI is in the democratization of knowledge, which is the ability to put both the organizational knowledge and external knowledge at the fingertip of every worker within the company. And even more importantly, the ability to democratize access to skills. Business users interacting with complex systems or business users even creating services through low-code and no-code solutions that are powered by Gen AI. But these benefits have to be balanced with certain risks of Gen AI. The first and the foremost risk of Gen AI that CIOs are worried about is loss of intellectual property. They're worried about it in two ways. One, they're worried about their data, which is used as an input to the model, what is called as a prompt to the model, may be used to further train and enrich the model. Or to say the other way, your input could potentially become an output of the model. The other risk that they're worried about, essentially, is when they actually move data to external environments to either do prompt engineering or fine-tuning of these models, they are worried about the loss of the data. Again, these are worries. There are clearly practices to mitigate some of these risks. The models can hallucinate. What is hallucination? Is a complex way of saying the model sometimes can make up facts. Nobody, including ChatGPT, is entitled to its own facts. CIOs are also worried about the black box nature of these models, which is when the models produce responses, it's often really hard to figure out why they're saying what they're saying, because they often do not have training data attribution, or in simple terms, they don't reference why they are saying what they are saying. So the challenges of Gen AI are non-trivial from an enterprise standpoint. Now, the big takeaway in this slide is, are the risks of Gen AI real? The answer is yes. Can we completely eliminate the risks of Gen AI today? The answer is no. Can we mitigate most of these risks through training, technology, and processes? The answer is absolutely yes. Where are enterprises in terms of Gen AI adoption? This is actually from a survey that we ran 4 months ago. Close to 20% of organizations are in some stage of adoption of Gen AI. Slightly less than 5% of them are running workloads in production. 70% of them are in active exploration. And look at that number on the far right. Only 10% of them are doing nothing about Gen AI today. This clearly begs a question, which is, what are they doing with Gen AI if they're doing something? There are a variety of use cases that we are starting to see emerge for generative AI within the enterprise. The most common use cases are in the natural language domain, which is not very surprising because most of these models are large language models. The input to the model is text, and the output of a model is text as well. Within the NLP domain, there are a bunch of beachhead use cases we are seeing. For example, we are starting to see content generation or text generation being very popular in marketing and communications domain. Writing blog posts, marketing newsletters, creating product marketing brochures, and so on and so forth, with almost always a human in the loop. We're also starting to see interest in content summarization, which is to summarize lengthy documents. We've particularly seen an acceleration in this use case in the past few months because the context window of the models are getting larger. From 4K context window with GPT-3, we have now got to 32K context window with GPT-4, and there are some models that are out there with 100K context windows, which is a way of saying they can process up to roughly 70,000 to 75,000 words in one go or in a single prompt and response. But I think the most strategic use case that we see within the NLP domain is enterprise search, where organizations want to reimagine search to be interactive and to be more semantic-oriented, which is a way of saying more similarity search rather than just keyword search. And every CIO that we talk to says, we want to deploy a private ChatGPT within our firewall, which is we want to build a personalized question and answering system that really taps into our knowledge, and we want to put it in front of our knowledge workers. We're seeing use cases in the computer vision domain as well. I'm sure many of you are familiar with text-to-image models like DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, and Midjourney, which can create images from text. Seeing great applications in media and entertainment and gaming. I spoke to a gaming company 6 months ago. They've created a new game where the character the images, the storyline, the text annotation, and even the multiplayer moderation forum is all underpinned by large language models and computer vision models. They are an 8-person company that's earning $25 million in revenue. We're also seeing interest in computer vision automation use cases in industries like manufacturing or retail, where CIOs want to combine the power of large language models and computer vision models to do annotations to unannotated images. For example, I'm sure you're sitting on a lot of images with little or poor metadata. And you could use the power of these models to add metadata to it, which means that you could now do natural language search of those images. Or you could do object detection in those images, such as detecting pictures of children. From a regulatory standpoint, that might be quite important for you. And clearly a domain where there's been a rapid increase in adoption of Gen AI is developer tools, right? Where these Gen AI tools are generating boilerplate code and doing code completion for developers. Think of tools such as GitHub Copilot, Amazon Code Whisperer, Duet AI from Google, Tab9, and so on and so forth. But we think the application of Gen AI is going to stretch beyond just code generation into other areas, such as code analysis, infrastructure as code, documentation, which is to look at code and create documentation, and so on and so forth. And in the long run, the real power of Gen AI is when it's applied in deep sciences, such as drug discovery in life sciences, or in new chemical formulation in manufacturing and chemical industries. So the key takeaway is Gen AI is going to reset our lives in a transformative way, both in our personal lives and professional lives. And what we are starting to see really is very early stages of what we call as machine creativity. Now that we've established where the market is, what the use cases are, let's talk about how to harness the value of Gen AI. How do I bring it safely and robustly within the enterprise? The first step, obviously, is to identify the right use cases. And we are here to help you with that. One of the things that Gartner has done is to create a toolkit called the Use Case Prism. What we do in the Use Case Prism is to provide a toolkit where you could plot the business value and technical feasibility of a use case. For example, for business value, you would look at factors such as cost reduction, availability of measurable metrics, time to value. And for technical feasibility, you would look at metrics such as, do we have the data for this use case? What is the risk of this use case? What is the vibrancy of the commercial tools and vendors that are out there that could serve that use case? So by using a mathematical formula, taking all of these factors into consideration, you create your own personalized use case prism. And obviously, the use cases that you want to choose are use cases that have high business value and high technical feasibility. As an example here, you could see that use cases such as text generation, code generation, document summarization are fairly well-established use cases today. Whereas use cases such as having a customer-facing chatbot or an enterprise search requires some level of sophistication and some level of combining your data with the power of these models, which obviously takes much longer time and a more sophisticated technology architecture. But beyond providing these toolkit, what we've also done essentially is we have published more than 25 use case prisms for Gen AI across different industries, such as life sciences and retail and telco, as well as published use case prisms across different business functions, such as customer service, marketing, and sales, and so on and so forth. So this is really a good place for you to get started in terms of thinking about what are the low-hanging fruits that you can pursue from a Gen AI standpoint. The next step is obviously to make sure that your Gen AI strategy is aligned with your digital strategy or your business strategy. It is subservient to the goals of the organization. And even more importantly, you also want to make sure that there is adequate partnership with the business, sponsorship from the business, and also you have a Tiger team that can go and build prototypes that it can demonstrate with business owners. And finally, metrics, metrics, and metrics. We need to know what we are iterating towards, and we need to know what success looks like. So having the right metrics to measure the success of these projects, as well as having a timeline by when you're going to hit those metrics, is super important. One of the common questions that we get from clients like you is, what are the different ways in which we can consume Gen AI today? There are 5 different approaches that we have started seeing emerging in the market. And I'm going to go from left to right here. The first approach is where Gen AI is an embedded feature in an existing workflow or an application that you're using. The simplest example of that is Copilot, right? Where it's embedded into a workflow or an application that you're using, or even Teams Premium, for example, right? Where Microsoft claims that they could do meeting translation or transcription inside the app. This is by and far the least disruptive way to deploy Gen AI, but obviously it's going to be restricted to that app, and it's also going to be restricted in terms of your ability to tune those models, and also you're kind of at the mercy of the provider that provides that service. The second approach is where you're primarily doing prompt engineering, which I'm sure is a term many of you heard before. What is prompt engineering? In a simple sense, it's the instructions that you provide to the model to steer the model to give the output that you want. So in this scenario, the model is often running in the cloud, and you're providing instructions to the model. For example, rather than saying, write an essay on sustainability, which is going to probably is going to yield you a very generic answer, you're going to say, write an essay on sustainability in less than 500 words in the style of a Wall Street analyst that's presenting to the CEO of Telstra. The quality of response is going to be different, right? So in the first 2 approaches, the models are frozen, and all you're doing is prompting or prompt engineering into the model. As I said earlier, the real magic for a lot of enterprises happen when you combine your data with these models, these pre-trained models. That's exactly what you do in the third approach, because in the third approach is called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG, for those of you who are technically bent. So what you actually do is you represent your organizational data as a mathematical representation, and the model accesses that data to fetch a response. For example, Gartner could be building an HR chatbot, and Arun wants to know how many days of PTO do I have remaining in the year. Now, if I go and ask ChatGPT, it has no clue because it's not connected to my enterprise system, right? By connecting my enterprise data with these models, you are grounding these models with a sense of reality. So the RAG architecture is becoming very popular for question and answering applications or for enterprise search applications. Again, in the RAG approach, the model is still frozen. All of the changes you're making is to the prompt. The reason why I keep specifying the model is frozen is because when the model is frozen, you're only paying for the inferencing of the model. So from a cost perspective, it is a kind of a viable and a reasonable choice for a lot of enterprises. Now, in the fourth approach, what you actually do is you fine-tune the model. So what is fine-tuning a model? You take a base model, you bring your enterprise data into it, and you create a custom model. That custom model is dedicated to your organization or dedicated to that use case. We don't see a lot of organizations fine-tuning the models today. Why? Because it's complex and it's very expensive. And finally, you can build your own models from the scratch, which is obviously very, very expensive, and we haven't seen a lot of customers do it today. The idea behind this approach, and this is a research note that you can access, is to talk about what is your responsibility versus the provider's responsibility. And also, there are clearly trade-offs with these approaches, right? Because the more you go to the left, it's cheaper and it's simpler, whereas the more you go to the right, you're mitigating the risks of Gen AI in terms of reducing the hallucination and boosting the accuracy, as well as having control over the privacy and security policies. If you've decided to build Gen AI applications, which I'm sure many of you will do, you need to start thinking about what does a platform for Gen AI really look like. I think of Gen AI platform as a 4-layer cake. The bottom layer is the infrastructure layer. You require lots of compute to train and fine-tune these models, particularly a lot of GPUs, which are unfortunately short in supply as we speak. The second layer is the models themselves, and there are a variety of model categories we see today. There are massively pre-trained foundation models like GPT-4 from OpenAI and Microsoft, or PaLM from Google. There are domain models. What do we mean by domain models? These are typically mid-sized or smaller-sized models that are very use case specific. We are also starting to see the advent of verticalized domain models. For example, domain models that are trained on vertical specific data. For example, there are providers that are taking general purpose models and training them on SEC filing data in the US, which makes it a financial services specific model, or PubMed information, which makes it a healthcare specific model. Model hubs are also playing an important role. What are model hubs? Think of them like a marketplace for models, where open source models are curated and available that developers can get access. I'm sure some of you may have heard of this company called Hugging Face, which is one of the popular model hubs for developers to get access to open source models. We need tools to bring these models to life, to bring these models to production. I spoke about mathematical representation of data that is typically stored in a specialized database called as a vector database. And there are vendors like Pinecone and VV8 and Chroma that offers these specialized databases. You need tools for fine-tuning the models, and there are companies like Scale AI and Snorkel AI that offer fine-tuning tools. You need tools for deploying the models across multiple environments, for doing model validation. There are companies like Anyscale that provide tools for that. We need tools for connecting these models, because in some cases, for example, you may be doing call center automation, where you're taking a customer call, you are converting them from speech to text. You're using another model to do summarization of the text, and you're doing probably another model for doing sentiment analysis of that. Now, you need tools to connect these different models together to achieve that automation use case. And that's what the API orchestration tools like LangChain, for example, do. And finally, we need tools to make sure that we're deploying these models in a responsible, ethical way that is devoid of any kind of a bias. And there are plenty of tools that are out there, from vendors like Credo AI and Fiddler AI, that enable you to deploy these models in a responsible way. And then there's a huge ecosystem of application providers that are building apps based on these models. Microsoft, Salesforce, Google, and so on and so forth, as well as a lot of startups like Jasper AI, targeting marketing, or Lavender AI, targeting sales, or Glean, targeting enterprise search, or GitHub, targeting software engineering as a use case. This ecosystem is rapidly exploding due to tremendous amount of investments from the venture capital community. We spoke about risks, and risk mitigation is a critical aspect of operationalizing these models. We need to protect the privacy of our data. How do you do that? Almost always use the enterprise model APIs. For example, if you want to use ChatGPT, use ChatGPT Enterprise when it becomes available, or use the ChatGPT API or the GPT 3.5 model that's available in the Azure cloud, because that comes with a guarantee that we will not use your data to train the model. We also have to make sure that we are reducing hallucinations of these models. And as we said earlier, the RAG architecture and fine-tuning are some of the ways to reduce model hallucinations, because you're grounding these models with your data. We need to make the models explainable, add a sense of referenceability. Again, the RAG architecture and explainability toolkits are a means to demystifying the black box nature of the model. We need to prevent misuse of the model. That typically happens through ML ops observability tools that observe anomalous behavior of these models. And finally, let's not ignore the human impact of GenAI. I have lost count of the number of people that have asked me if I'll be doing what I'm doing 5 years from now, right? And I'm sure a lot of you are asking this question to yourself and to other people. We need to upskill our people with new skills such as prompt engineering or how to responsibly deploy these models. And we also need to provide them with clear career paths in terms of new skills they should be acquiring, and even in some sense, emotional assistance, given the mental toll that GenAI is going to wreak havoc on them. And finally, we need to create an environment where people can rapidly experiment and build prototypes, building sandbox environments for creators within the organization to experiment with GenAI. We're starting to see more and more organizations conduct hackathons as a way to institutionalize and even gamify the experience of developing applications using GenAI models. And finally, you're going to learn lessons. You're going to succeed, you're going to fail. What's important essentially is, are we capturing the lessons as to where we are successful and where we are failing, and communicate those lessons widely within the organization. This is such a fast-moving ecosystem. I do this, 9x5, or these days it seems more like 24/7, and I can't keep up, to be honest with you, the pace at which this is moving, which means that we need to have a small team that is keeping abreast of new innovations and new technologies in the marketplace. So in a nutshell, identify and prioritize your use cases, focus on ownership and metrics, think about the trade-offs between different GenAI approaches, take a platform approach to it, mitigate the risks of it, and standardize and execute. Particularly the platform approach is important because the models that we're using today may not be the models you'll be using a year from now because of how fast this ecosystem is moving. We need to have the ability to build a platform that is agnostic of models so that we have the ability to swap these models and reduce vendor lock-in to the extent possible. What is the future of GenAI? Again, we've seen tremendous amount of innovation in new models in the last 12 months. I feel like there's a new model that is getting launched literally every day in this space. We believe many applications that we use in our business lives and personal lives are going to be enriched with GenAI. If you take my household, we are a big Khan Academy family. My kids learn math through Khan Academy, and as you probably know, Khan Academy introduced Khan Amigo, which is an OpenAI-based AI chatbot to help with math. We are also big Duolingo users at our house. We learn Spanish through Duolingo, and Duolingo introduced a new service called Duolingo Super, which is an AI-assisted chatbot to help you learn new languages. So this is not futuristic. As you can see, this is happening in front of us. Regulations are going to emerge. The EU, the European Union, is on the verge of publishing the AI Act and making it a law towards the end of the year. And we believe that's going to spawn new regulations across the globe, potentially including Australia, on what it takes to train the model and release these models. Because today, the governance and regulations are fairly lax in this space. Within the next couple of years, we will see every knowledge worker on the planet have an AI assistant that's going to help us improve our productivity. But we need to know how to more effectively work with these bots and machines that are going to emerge. What should you be doing when you go back to the office on Monday? Carpe diem, as they say, right? Seize your day. Identify what GenAI means for the organization in terms of looking at benefits, risks, opportunity, and a timeline for deployment. Make responsible AI front and center of your GenAI initiatives. Make sure that you are upskilling employees within the organization on the appropriate human-machine interaction. Make sure that you have a tiger team that's really staying abreast of fast-moving market developments. And finally, help your employees wade through this through upskilling and career mapping. With that, there's plenty of research that's available on Gartner.com. I'm super passionate about this topic, and I'm happy to stay around here and answer any questions you have. With that, I thank you very much for your time today, and I wish you a wonderful conference, and I hope this presentation was useful to you.